If you had to pitch Saxo Bank within 10 seconds, what would you say?
Well, we're well beyond the startup basis, but I think Saxo Bank is a new way of looking at the market. It's a way of really consolidating all the silos you typically have in a bank. So you do everything in one platform, one aggregated account, very similar way of doing different types of transactions. A lot of user-generated content, so also deploying some of the thinking from social media and those types of platforms. So it's a different way of running a bank, and for us, I think it's a new way of running a bank, which is also why we are able to white label it with a number of other financial institutions that want to make a shortcut to deliver a more dynamic service to their clients.
What would you say has been kept as pure as what you had at the beginning?
I think that the customer-centric thinking that we, the finance business is a pretty cynical one, as I'm sure you're aware, right? And to be honest, what I never like so much about that business is that the bank and the financial institution thinks very much of themselves before they think about the clients. It's been a lot better in recent years, but historically the finance sector was very arrogant, and it was like, here's the big bank, we tell you what to do, and you should just be happy you're allowed to be a client of this great institution, right? We never had the possibility to paint ourselves into that corner because we never were a great big institution from the outset. So we had to go client-centric. We had to provide something new, more taking into account the client's needs and being more respectful of actually making him happy, right? So I think we tried to carry that through. We have also grown bigger, obviously, than we were in those days. So sometimes people tend to a little bit forget the client, but we try to keep that at the center of our thinking. How do we make a better experience? How do we make it more transparent? How do we help people make the right decisions? Give them a better informed basis of making their decisions, and then try to just be as supportive around the clients as possible.
What's your background? Where do you come from? What did you study, if you studied?
Well, my background is pretty unusual, I would say, for a banker. I did finish high school. And actually I was an okay student, but I was just so not into school anyway, and I liked to hang out in bars. And so when I was 18 and I finished that part of my life, everybody in my family expected me to go to university, but I actually went to Spain and made a bar instead because I thought that would be more fun. I did actually have some thoughts about going back to university at a later point, but it never worked out that way. So at the end of the day,
so you opened the bar?
I opened a bar when I was 18 or 19, I guess.
Yeah.
Which was fun.
It was a good business?
No, not particularly. But
it was your first business?
It was my first business. I mean, we survived for 4 years before I thought, let's move on to something else, right?
4 years?
Yeah, I had 4 years in the south of Spain in the sun, and it was pretty good fun, but it was not a terrific business. But at least we managed to stay alive.
But you were putting some intent into this business? Like you wanted to make it big, or it was just for fun?
We were like typical young students. I had a very bad company, right? So we liked to hang out in bars. And we thought, we don't have money to do this. We have to get on the other side of the bar to be able to be there, right? And of course, actually, that's something I have to say to young entrepreneurs. You should really try to know a little bit about what you do, and maybe work for somebody else at least for a couple of years before you venture into it yourself. But of course, you don't take your own good advice. So I went straight into a bar with no knowledge of how to run one, which meant it was pretty challenging at times. But at least we had fun, and we got it out of the system, and we could move on to something a little bit more.
Your parents used to do business also?
No, actually, my father died when I was 15. So that he was very academic. So he would probably have fought very hard against the bar in Spain. So maybe if he'd been alive, my life would have turned out differently. My mother was a banker also, but was a housewife for a number of years, and then went back to banking when my parents divorced a few years before my father's death. So no, there's no real trace of certainly not of bars in that family.
And you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, younger brother, yeah.
Is he in banking also?
No, he's a very smart very smart engineer actually. So he's
Okay.
working for one of the big Danish engineering companies.
So from Spain, you flew to London directly?
No, I mean after about 4 years in Spain,
So you were?
we were it must have been about 23 or something like that. It was fun and we had a great time, and but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I could feel that, right? So I went back to Denmark for a short period. I actually worked here as a chef in a restaurant for about a year, a Mexican restaurant, so I can still cook a pretty mean chili con carne. But that was obviously not it either. And then one of my friends actually called me one day and he said, one of my childhood friends, I'm in London, I'm a stockbroker, and it's really interesting and you make a lot of money. And I thought, this guy has zero background for being a stockbroker, just like me. And I was quite interested. I read the Financial Times for a few years, even when I was in Spain.
So you were interested?
Yes, I always was very interested in
finance,
in trading and commodities and that kind of stuff. So this guy called me and said, why don't you come over here? I said, yeah, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. So I went to London, and basically with no background, money enough for like 3 months maximum, right? And then I sat down, read a lot of books. It's probably the most serious period of my life because I really felt I had to get up to speed very, very quickly. And then I went around a few places and handed in a CV and a little business plan of how I would try to build business in Scandinavia. And in the end, somebody took a chance on me, and I got in on a very low salary and a nice performance basis.
So you were selling derivatives?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I started out my life in futures and options, so in the derivative space, particularly on commodities. And then after a couple of years, I realized how much more interesting foreign exchange was seen from my point of view, and then I spent a few years in foreign exchange, which was back then, and for that matter now was a good business and a place where you could.
So you've learned there, you've learned the environment, the market, the specificities, how to sell, also how to serve customers.
Yeah, I was mainly a salesman.
Okay.
I did like the let's say the underlying techniques and that, and also I did understand quite a lot about what I was selling. Not all salespeople in the financial sector do that, but I like to understand the mechanics of futures trading and foreign exchange. So
it's very complicated. It's super high level of engineering.
It's not that complicated, to be honest, right? But it's but you still need to know it, right? So I was selling mostly the possibilities of that. I was never a trader myself. I never really sat and took risk or anything like that. But I would interact quite closely with traders and help them support my clients, etc. So I was more of a sales. We called it an account executive, where you would support the clients, but you would also certainly in those days, a lot of financial industry is selling, right? At the end of the day, the products are very generic. Whether it's one bank or the other. So you need to create
some strong link with the customers.
Yeah, in those days, it's before everything was online and that, it's very much about actually personal relationships, whether the client trusted you, whether the client liked you. You were very protective of your clients because the guy sitting next to you would always try to steal your clients, right? So it was very much about personal relationships and looking after people, which again, I think is also what Saxo Bank is about, that we always felt quite client-centric. It is very easy to get cynical in the financial industry, but you have to bear in mind that without the client, you're really nowhere, right?
And so after this experience, you decided to do your own directly? What happened?
Well, I had a client. I was mostly servicing smaller, mostly Danish institutions because they were getting a pretty rough deal from the big banks in Denmark. So it was relatively easy to show them a better service coming out of London and give them better pricing, etc. And I had one small broker where there was a guy that I liked, that I was trading a lot with. He was a very aggressive trader, and he was a good business, right? So he said to me, next time you're in Copenhagen, could we have a drink? I said, sure. And he said, when we met, he said, I really thought about doing my own thing, but I need somebody to help me a little bit with the financial stuff and the links into London and that. So I said, okay. I was also thinking a little bit about doing some retail stuff because I was doing institutions, so we couldn't really go for the retail market without getting into a channel conflict of interest. So I said maybe it could be nice to invest in a small retail brokerage, and so we set up shop. Kim, as my partner's called, Kim Fournet, started it out. I actually only joined after about 3 years.
So where was it based?
It was here in Copenhagen.
Okay.
Right down the road, actually,
Okay.
about 100 meters from here. So it was on top of the most popular bar in Copenhagen, so it's very, very practical.
Okay, so you opened this and you started as a traditional boutique in a way.
Yeah, telephone based.
Yeah.
Really, mostly on foreign exchange, and mostly just simply trying to service clients better, right? And to be honest, we did not really realize about the internet till a few years later.
So in 1995, to differentiate yourself, you decided to go fully on the internet.
Yeah, we had again a friend that had some ideas about it. To be honest, I didn't know much about it, if anything, and but I kind of liked the idea. And there was a few people that were beginning to do something on the stock side, particularly E-Trade, and there was actually a couple of other phone-based systems that were sort of slightly moving that direction. And we thought, why not do that for foreign exchange, right? So we embarked on it. We actually were very naive. We thought we'll get, I'd see people, they can build the platform. 6 months later, we can say goodbye to them again and not have that expense anymore. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way with IT people, right? So now we have about 600 of them, and they never left again.
Yeah. So you were not a user of the internet at the time, not really.
I mean, 1995. I
Nobody
mean, you're too young to remember, right? But it was very.
The very
It was
beginning.
very esoteric, very exotic to people. And I remember speaking to big shots in the financial industry that were convinced that this is just a fad. It'll go away. People will always want the personal relationship, And we were even unsure, but it was the only way for us to differentiate. And all our salespeople and all our employees thought we were crazy spending all this money on this strange technology. And in the end, most of them admitted that it was a good decision, but at the time they thought it was a very, very stupid way to spend money too.
At that time, you didn't realize that you were actually building all the differentiation and all the value that today when you read about Saxo Bank, you read like this is the first investment bank that used the internet as a leverage to...
I would say there were a couple of other brokers out there at the time. We were probably, I would guess, the third or the fourth system in the world on foreign exchange, and the other ones had started inside 12 months before. Funnily enough, many of those early adopters had done quite well. So it was very good timing, and this was pure luck, to be honest, right, that we found it there. But it was good timing, and it took a while before it began to take off, but we were like a couple of years.
How long it took?
Well, the first year or so, or even a couple of years, it did very little, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're stupid with this internet, it doesn't work." But in the end, it began to pick up. I can remember first time we opened the website, after about 4 minutes, we got a registration from somebody signing up saying, I'd like to learn more. We were like, yes, it's kind of pouring, until we realized it was one of our own programmers that had tested. That took about 2 weeks before anybody else came, right? But when it really, really changed was actually year 2000. There was so much worry about this millennium bug. You remember the stories about that? The planes were going to fall out of the sky, and everything was going to turn dark. And in fact, nothing happened. But it kind of kept a lot of people away. The only thing that happened was our website was showing 1st of January, year 1900. I remember that. So so nothing happened, and people then got a little bit more comfortable, and then it actually began to grow quite fast.
And at that moment, it's 1 year later, you have the bank accreditation, right?
Yeah, we thought that, and that turned out actually, at least for a long time, to be a very good decision, because most of the people in that space were brokers. And a broker is a very nondescript type thing. What is it? Does it have capital? Does it not have capital? Can you trust it? Can you not trust it? How is it regulated? But a bank, everybody knows what it is. So it was kind of partially a marketing ploy, that we thought if we're a bank, at least we got a clear identity. So we worked hard. That's actually the first time we ever took money into the company, was because we were lacking like €1.5 million to get to the bank capital, which was €5 million at the time, and we didn't have it. So that guy that put that money in did a great deal. we got him out 4 years later with 20 or 30 times his money back, so he was very happy. But at that time we were very small, and we wanted to become a bank, and we didn't actually change what we did very much, but it did work. You know, people began to feel more comfortable using us because we were a bank. Other banks that we needed for infrastructure and pricing, somehow they look at you differently when you're also a bank. Even if you're a tiny little bank, it just makes a difference. So that was a good move in 2001.
And then you started going fully on fintech, developing lots of platform and new products, always customer centric. And I was wondering, because I haven't been through all the products that you've been doing, but you say that you are offering the possibility for any fintech startup to actually use Saxo Bank to develop themselves.
Yeah, I mean, another important thing that happened in 2001 was that we did our first white label solution, right? That something strange happened in like 98 and 99, around there. People that, again, you have to remember, we were a very small institution and nobody cared about us, right? But all of a sudden, like people like Goldman and that came and said and showed interest in us, and we were like, Goldman Sachs interested in us, and other people, right? And we think maybe this platform is a little bit special, you know, because we hadn't fully appreciated that. But when the really big boys wanted to even come and see us, we were like, hey, maybe we're onto something here, right? Yeah. We couldn't really monetize anything because it was pretty homegrown, so we couldn't really make any big deals. But still, we got a little bit excited that even these guys bothered to talk to us, right? Because 2 years before, they would not have spent a second on you if you called them. They would just not be interested, right?
But they were seeing you as a software provider?
Yeah, they were just, because nobody was anywhere, right? So they were just seeing, here's these guys, they did something a little bit before we did it, or anybody really did it, and they were just interested in it. Could it be deployed in different ways, right? But actually it was more like, particularly one Portuguese broker that we had as a B2B relationship, and they saw this platform and they said, we want this for our clients. And we said, we can't have it because it's not built for other institutions. You can trade on it if you want, you cannot have it for your clients. And they said, well, we want it. And we said, okay, then we have to look at it, right? So they kind of forced us to tweak a few things so that they could also use it for their clients. And we were like very reluctant because it was not really the intention, right? We hadn't thought that much in terms of white labeling. But it was obviously a very blessing in disguise that they forced us to do it, because then we realized, hey, I mean, this technology we can actually sell to other financial institutions, and they can be like extensions of our strategy. Obviously, they don't do it for us; they do it to extend their own strategy. But they kind of work that way for us. And today, that's a very important part of our business. We got more than 100 other institutions using the platform.
So it's Citibank.
Yeah, actually, Citibank moved out of it recently because they didn't want to do retail. But we have other big names like Barclays and Erste and several, but also a lot of smaller institutions that are very good customers because they kind of focus a lot on it. They take that platform and then they make it their primary business activity. So many times,
can you describe the business activity?
Well, it's trading. You know, it's for people that. It's typically for slightly more sophisticated traders. We have some very large ones, you know, billionaire types, right? But also much smaller clients. You don't have to be a millionaire to trade on the platform. Helps, but you don't have to.
No, but I mean, in terms, okay, you have the trading platform directly for your customers, but this kind of B2B businesses.
In essence, if you have a financial institution and you think, I'm a little bit behind the curve, or I don't want to develop all this stuff myself, which is a very wise decision because it's very complicated and very time consuming, both to do the front end, but also all the liquidity relationships in the back. You know, dozens and dozens of integrations with other banks and exchanges, etc. So a very wise decision is to not do all that stuff yourself. So then they would be able to come to us, get their own customized versions where they could integrate some of their own analysis and some of their own services, and then distribute that to their similar type clients, right? So it's kind of a B2B2C relationship where it is a true white label. These guys really sit on the customer relationships. We don't know the underlying customers, so it's not like an introducing broker where they just set the clients to us. It is really their own business, but we just provide all of the infrastructure.
But you don't have access to their people?
No.
Okay.
We actually, it's very convenient for us as well because we only have to do one set of due diligence on the counterpart, and they then take over the marketing and the diligencing and KYC, your customer and all the complicated legal stuff that you have today. So for us, when we're in let's say somewhere far away from Copenhagen, it's actually great to have somebody with local understanding and local franchise to promote it. Not necessarily in our name. Some people use our name powered by Saxo Bank. Some people want to have it entirely in their own identity, and we don't really care. I mean, we see the business coming to us.
So you really find your way because you didn't saw you as a competitor, whereas you were a bank. When they put their ego at the right place because they were using you, I mean, going through you to get your power intelligence.
Well, it's an enormous shortcut, right?
Yeah.
Because we spent now 20 years on this platform.
Yeah.
We spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on developing it, right? As I said, we have 600 engineers sitting there working on it day in, day out, right? And this is, it would also be impossible for us if we didn't have the white label relationships to help us monetize on leverage this central technology, right? So it's a very big shortcut for an institution that they don't have to worry about all that stuff, and that we worry for them. They really only have to worry about the sales and the service and the marketing, the customer relationships. So
how many people is it in terms of engineers at Saxo Bank today?
About 600 IT
600,
people, right?
okay.
Obviously, some of it's maintenance, some of it is development, new development, but around, which is about 40% of our workforce, which is a huge proportion for a bank. Normally it would be maybe 15% IT.
And when you see the rise of all the kind of unbundled fintech services like TransferWise, I was with the CEO interviewing him also several days ago, or Contox, in Barcelona. Obviously, you because what they believe is that you can be the best starting from one very teeny service that the bank will do badly, and then become maybe as huge as a bank, but with a startup mindset.
I think that's very valid. I mean, there are a lot of people out there doing sort of small corners of transfers, like peer-to-peer lending, all this stuff, right? What we do is very complicated. It really is a lot of little things. So it's not very simple to do for a non-bank, I would say, right? Or at least a broker. The regulatory stuff around it is brutal, right? There's so much stuff you need to comply with, right? I mean, so we have 600 engineers, but we probably have 100 compliance people also, right? So it's like really complicated. And when you're doing only a small corner like transfers or something like that, you don't get into that level of complexity. But you can certainly do it better. I mean, we have a little potential gem sitting inside. We also have a payment solution provider, which actually is a little bit separate from Saxo Bank itself, and they have done some very interesting work.
So this kind of thing, you try this kind of innovation?
No, absolutely. I mean, and we do try to also sometimes leave them to work a little bit, because once you get into the big machine, again,
totally.
Yeah, it's a big machine, even with us bureaucratic to some extent.
Totally, you have no choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
That's one, leading me to my next question, is that at the beginning you started because the banks, they were opening the way for you because they had poor customer services, basically. And now that you are big with Saxo Bank, you understand that the infrastructure up to a certain point, you have no other choice and not being as good as when you are a young ninja.
It gets so complex. It's like blowing up a balloon. As you expand in scale, the surface area of all the things you have to cover is just growing exponentially, right? So, and particularly with all this huge additional regulatory complications in the last many years, right? That adds to this complexity. So it's not just thinking of a new product, right? Then you have to run all through the value chain, that it's compliant all the way through, that your back office can handle it, blah 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 blah. But we're still in a better place than the vast majority of banks, because at least we have it in one engine, right? Many of the big banks have huge problems today because they did so many acquisitions. They never fully integrated systems, so some of them are running 100, 200 IT platforms, right? And they know this problem, but but it's almost unfixable, right? Because the execution risk of putting together these hundreds of different platforms is just enormous, right? Plus, of course, the cost of doing it. So we are lucky that we are still sitting with basically one engine, right?
Yeah. How do you integrate the acquisition you do?
Well, we don't do an awful lot of acquisitions, you know. We to some extent, one of our problems have been a little bit the sort of non-invented here syndrome. You know, if our guys could do their own Excel spreadsheets, they would do it, right? Yeah. But we have recently managed to get people to accept that there are actually people outside of Saxo Bank that can also do intelligent things. So we are beginning to buy little corners and integrate them. But I think also still the strength is that we are not sort of a huge patchwork of many different systems. It's essentially our systems. If we do take something external, we integrate it as much as possible. So we call it one bank, one platform, which is a very important initiative. And we've certainly done some stuff in a very complicated way where maybe we could have bought our way out of it very simply. But we also think because we want to white label all this stuff, if we then have to go and buy another 10 licenses from other companies in order to be able to give it out to somebody, again, the complexity just explodes, right? And so many people that need a piece of the pie. Right now, we have a platform. If you have a financial institution, you could use it. Well, here it is, and we share the revenues, right? We don't have to discuss it with 100 other companies, and everybody trying to get their views in on how it should work, and they should be more important than that supplier, and blah blah blah. Right? So,
you keep the mindset of the entrepreneur in the positioning of Saxo Bank. When I read the 10. The same thing that will happen in 2016 according to the eyes of the economist of Saxo Bank, the black swans, and the fact that the dollar is no longer a strong money, and that the startup will explode, the bubble. Do you believe in all of this? I mean, is it your vision that is in this? No?
The outrageous predictions is a marketing ploy, to be honest, that has worked extremely well for us because it gets thousands of articles around the world. And the idea of it is actually we try to remind people that this is not necessarily what we think is going to happen. This is what you should think about. What if it happened? What impact would it have? So we're trying to just teach people to think in terms of black swans, whether positive or negative, right? Yeah. So it's run particularly by a terrific guy, Sten Jacobsen, who's a very, very good friend, and he's been with the bank for 15 years. But he likes to be outrageous, you know. He likes to challenge people, and he's by far not always right. Think that, because then it would be a very negative world, right?
Yeah, but totally. But that's what's interesting in the way you develop Saxo Bank is that you started with a kind of a care for customer in a place where there is no care. It's way too rational, and also with this psychological thing of investors. Like we need to think about what they might think. So these are the rules. That's what may happen maybe in 2016, because it will have an impact on on the market. So you like, it's almost like my analysis. Saxo Bank is feminine in a way where you put some care in customer and some psychological subtle analysis of the entrepreneur's mindset.
We like to think so. We like to think so because I think it is important that you critically think yourself, right? And we want the customers to at least play with these ideas, what if scenarios, you know, instead of, because many people, unfortunately, when they read from one of the big banks that Google's going up, then okay, let's buy it, right? And then the next one day they say, oh, now it's going down, oh, let's sell it, right? Now they may be right, but I'm very cynical about analysis, to be honest. They are 50% right and wrong, right? So and the worst thing you can do is chase everybody around. Everybody's ideas, because then you just end up with, why am I long this, why am I short that, right? You need to try to help your clients make their own mind up, because at least they can then analyze, what did I make that decision that went well, where did that come from, right? It's not just something I picked from one random investment bank and then from somebody else. And if you don't have, you know, a holistic view of your own investment, we're talking relatively sophisticated investors here, right? So you need to have a holistic view of things. Even so, you're going to be wrong very frequently. I'm very wrong very often, right? And I just realized that's the name of the game, because there's a high degree of randomness in this, and there are unpredictable patterns that's just there. But you need to at least have a reason to have your own convictions, right? And then you got to learn when you're wrong, why was I wrong, and that's what we're trying to help people to, again, make informed decisions, and also very much to have risk management, right? Because it's not a problem to be wrong, as long as you don't lose a huge amount of money on it, right? It's okay to be wrong. You can learn a lot from being wrong, but the real thing about financial investment is risk management. You have to lose not too much when you're wrong, and you have to be patient and make a lot when you're right. You know, this sounds very trivial, but it's the truth, right? And actually most people do the opposite. When they get it wrong, they sit and hope and pray, and they end up losing a lot. And when they get it right, they get so excited to take a profit that they take it far too early, right? So it's kind of completely the reverse of what you should do. It's very basic. It's 101 on investment, but that risk management is really important. Take those losses while they're manageable. Try again. Take another little loss. Try again. But just the clarity you get of getting out of the market and saying, oh, for a second I can just relax and I'm not making or losing. Let me think again. Should I buy or should I sell now, right? And that's just all these little things we obviously try to build into the technology, also certain tools that help people manage their risk better and be very, very transparent about what their risks are, so they can see instantly if they have a problematic situation or they should protect themselves against something. And we have a lot of tools that help people protect against like real disaster scenarios, right?
Do you believe in the fintech startup to predict what happened on the market with the big data? No? No.
I mean, there are many people out there that have predictive systems, right? There are very few of them that are. And if you really had it, I mean, I think some of the big hedge funds actually have some internal proprietary stuff that's pretty useful, but I can guarantee you cannot buy it for $2.99 in some web shop, right? Because if you have something valuable, you're not going to distribute it, right? But basically, I think there's too much randomness in financial markets to really be able to entrust yourself to a machine. And even if that machine works for a little bit, it is reflexive, as Soros says, you know, then the market will adjust to take that edge away very quickly, right? So I really think, real money is made in being an entrepreneur and building a business from scratch and making it very big. And then there's a certain bias in the market. If you stay in it long enough, stocks tend to go up because it tends to reflect the risk over very long periods. It has to logically reflect the risk that's in there. So you can also sit back and wait a very long time, and the market should generally work in your favor. And then there are unique people that maybe can beat the market, George Soros, Warren Buffett, you know. Maybe there are people there that are just smarter than the rest of it, but the vast majority cannot beat the market. I don't believe that. But they can be smart about their risk, and maybe they can actually beat it by having more clever risk management, but not by having higher degree of prediction. I don't believe in that.
And what about Bitcoin? It's something you invest in, you believe in?
I have a bit of Bitcoins, you know. I don't know if I believe in Bitcoin. I believe in the blockchain technology. It's very, very interesting, right? And I think that's a real serious game changer, right? Because the idea of decentralized confirmation, very important. Because that's what always goes wrong in financial markets or any other market, is centralized points of failure, a single point of failure, right? That's what happens when a central bank goes under or a currency breaks down, single point of failure. That being said, I do think increasingly it's clear that there are a lot of problems in the Bitcoin part of that space, right? But I still like it. I mean, it's very interesting, but I would say it's a blockchain more than Bitcoin.
Can you talk a little bit this first thing? Okay, this guy is complains. He tells it to the press. Big bad coverage, mediatic coverage. At the time, you're still Midas, or you already Saxo Bank? No, you're Midas. It's hard. It's bad for the business. How do you react?
It's always tough, particularly if you're a small company and you're not used to it. You know, we never used to get much in the media. Today, you know, to be honest, I'm in the media non-stop, and half of the time they're telling me off, and half of the time they say I'm a great guy, and I really don't care about it. Actually, I think it's quite fun, even if you have a little bit of wind in your face, right? But in those days it wasn't fun because the company wasn't very big either, and also it was very unfair because it's a very strong misrepresentation of what we stood for. Because actually we were trying to exactly be nice guys, and then we were put out as bad guys, which is the last thing we were compared to a number of other
The story that he lost money.
Yeah, I mean, an investor loses money. Of course, that will happen in financial markets.
But he accused
you. But the point was that we were being accused of not having told the person that this risk was there, and we actually had a page setting out. We today it's completely standard, but at that time we actually introduced that we pointed out all the risks that were implicit, and you had to read it and sign it and stuff like that. Today that's everybody does it, but you didn't all do that in the mid-90s, right?
Yeah.
So we were actually front runners and trying to make clear to people what the risks they were taking, right?
It happened.
So we got a lot of media coverage on that. It wasn't very nice. We never tried really to be in the media, so we never cared about the media. So it taught us a lot about actually being upfront with the media and explaining to them what we're trying to do. And I think today, I think we're quite good at handling the media, really, because we have a lot of good stories for the media as well. And generally, I think we're being treated pretty nicely. Not always, but most of the time. But actually, what was interesting was it was a very defining moment, because the people that had worked there for several years and felt that we were doing the right thing got really pissed off about this, right? So they're like, we're gonna show these assholes that's not who we are. So in a funny way, it was actually very good for the internal steel, that
feeling of being a team again.
Yeah, people got really pissed. People got really pissed, and they said, now we're gonna show them, right? So in a funny way, it was actually a good thing when you look back at it today.
So what have been super hard for you, if you think about certain moments, certain period of time, in growing so fast?
I'm not very good at remembering hard times. I'm actually not.
Forget about it.
Yeah, I'm not very good at remembering successes either. Actually, I'm kind of more thinking about the future than the past. It's nice to, and you should always remember to celebrate when something goes well, and you should take it very seriously if something goes wrong, and analyze it and react to it and improve on it. But by and large, I look forward. I don't really spend a lot of time.
Never remember anything.
No, so but of course, there's been hard moments, but there's been so many more beautiful, great moments that.
How would you describe the mindset, the culture that you try to create at Saxo Bank?
Well, I mean, and I wouldn't say we always succeed, but we are quite explicit about our views, and both Kim and I are quite strong on explicit values. I think most good businesses have good values, because otherwise you're not going to build a good business. But sometimes it's kind of very unclear what those values are. They're there, but they're not spelled out in detail. And we always try to spell out in detail what we thought drove a good business. Things like you got to apply rationality to it. You're really looking at what's happening out there and not trying to fake to yourself that you don't have a problem if you have a problem. You have to be fair to people, meaning performance-related pay. Also, when you don't deserve, you have to be a little bit tough with people, because otherwise they don't get it, right? You have to be productive. At the end of the day, we all love to sit and do PowerPoints and have long meetings, but at the end of the day, there's got to be $1 somewhere, to pay for all these wonderful PowerPoints. And so we have some values that we're very explicit about. We're actually very much based on Ayn Rand, my favorite philosopher that I've also worked with in a lot of other contexts. But so we adopted a lot of her thinking, because it is so good anyway that there's no real reason to invent the wheel. But so we've been always very explicit about it, and I found that people actually like it. Sometimes you might think, that's a little bit almost like a cult, and you have to think like this, but people actually like strong values and clear values.
So when people get into are recruited at Saxo Bank, I mean, what is the onboarding? Do they have to read certain books, for instance? Is there any practice like going all together? It's not like a startup going all together on holidays, but is there a meeting time every year with all the people?
We're famous for our parties, We have the best parties in town, certainly best corporate parties,
important.
We do strongly feel that people should celebrate. That's actually a little bit inspired also by Jack Welch that I like. I mean, people think maybe he's a little bit out of date, but in my view he's not. He's very simple in his thinking, but very clear and very efficient. And he always sort of says, for God's sake, remember to celebrate, right? And I think that's very important, because you have to be proud when you achieve something. Otherwise, why should you work for it if you can't feel a moment of happiness and pride that you've achieved something, why should you even get up in the morning and try to do something, right? This is very difficult in this country because we have this very much the tall puppy syndrome. You shouldn't think you're better than anybody else, and you should be very discreet about everything. And we try to install a slightly different attitude in people, not being bragging or being obnoxious, but if you have something to be happy and proud about, be happy and proud. Just for a Friday night or two, but then we move on and we make a new target. But we have to celebrate when we get something right, and we have to remember to say to a colleague, wow, that's a great work you did there, right? And just as we have to remember, you know what, that's really shit. You have to really pull yourself together because you are hurting the team or whatever. So you have to be honest both ways. And I'm not saying I'm the best at it. You always forget to say thank you to people and appreciate them. But it is important because I think to many people it means easily as much as bonuses and money to feel appreciated and respected by their peers and have self-esteem and have pride in what they do. And if you can't supply that, you have a real big problem, I think, if people are not proud of their company, right?
What in Denmark makes it so, according to you, like in France, but I don't know enough this culture, local culture, harder for entrepreneurs? What needs to be changed in terms of mentality, but maybe in terms of legal environment?
We have a relatively low proportion of entrepreneurs here because it's very, very strong welfare system, so people don't really get forced into having to take chances. At the same time, because we have a very high taxation system and everything is damn expensive in this town, it's also difficult to bootstrap it here because it's just more difficult than if you live in a Spanish town or somewhere like that, right? So there's some parts of the environment that doesn't make it very easy. We have some awful bankruptcy laws, so if you get it wrong, you can get stuck for years in very complicated situations, right? You have a framework. I would say it's not all bad, but by a long standard, not. The bureaucracy is not very bad here. Okay. The ease of making a company is relatively simple. The flexibility of the labor force, you can take on people, you can lay off people. So there are many good things, but by and large, there's a lot of cost factors. There's a very high tax system, so even if you succeed, you really get to pay for it. So it's kind of an unbalance. You work for years without pay, and when you finally maybe make it in your second or your third or your fourth attempt, and you're then supposed to rake in, then you pay huge taxes, right?
This is on the one side, and on the other side, the psychological side. Would you say, for instance, that at school you've learned to like the figure of the entrepreneur?
I think it's getting a lot better. There was a period where it wasn't really spoken of very highly. Today they're becoming a little bit heroes again, at least until they're successful. When they're sort of valiantly fighting and not so successful, people love them. When they then get successful and start driving big cars, then you got the tall poppy syndrome immediately, right? Yeah. But I think that it's getting a lot better, and I'm quite happy with the quality. I see a lot of business plans, obviously, and I think there's a lot of good stuff there, Not so many people are ready to go really all in the same way as you'd see it in the States or something like that. So many of them like to have a little bit of security and a little bit of help, and could we get some money from the government, and but the government is so all-pervasive in both your country and mine that it's hard to avoid it, right?
You need to be radical on this point.
Exactly. But I think it's going very much the right way, and I like to see that. And there are a lot of smart guys out there.
When you were starting, you didn't have this mindset of security.
No, not at all. I like risk.
How do you push the people that you invest on?
I try to help them. I wouldn't say I push them so much. I try to put a lot of resources available for them, not sort of stuff it into their throat like a foie gras goose or something, right? But try to say, this is what we can do for you if you want. We can help you with media. We can help you with budgeting. We can help you with HR. We can certainly help you with IT structure, architecture. We can look at your data handling, etc. So we have a long list of stuff that we feel we can either help directly with our own people. At least we know where to go and get the help very quickly, right? So for me, that's more important. I mean, obviously, like any other. In my new life, now that I'm sort of full-time investing, I can't run the companies, right? So I have to rely on having a good management team. But then I try to help them connecting them to when I see some dots that maybe they don't see, and connecting those. Particularly trying to help out with all of these guys need to sell more, right? So help them with some people that are really experienced in sales and online marketing and
like getting your hands dirty, opening the door. Sending email, introduction.
Sure, if I can do that, I do it. Yeah. And also, I think one of the benefits I have is because Saxo Bank is a big brand here, so the media tends to be very interested in whatever I do or whatever we do. So whenever I have a new company, it's very likely I can get them a good coverage in the media, and people get a little bit of attention. They get their 15 minutes of fame, but that may generate a few people say, "Oh, wow, I've been looking for that thing." And so I think that's also a benefit, that we make them a little bit more visible.
How many investment did you do until now?
So far I got about 25 or something.
In Europe? Are European based, or they are from anywhere?
They are all European, and very large extent Danish, actually, which is a little bit of a problem for me. I did one investment with you guys now, which is great. And
thanks for trusting enough.
So that's also a very specific part of my strategy, to hook up with people that I see as good people to work with around the world, because I need to see some more deal flow than just Danish, right? But today I would say out of the 25, 20 are Danish at least, maybe 21. And I like to, because if people only want our money and they know everything, then I would rather not do it, because then let them do it. I mean, I'm 53, I for sure don't know everything. So if a 22-year-old tells me he knows everything, I get a little bit suspicious, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a value we can add, that we can bring some experienced people in. The young, smart people are in the companies, but we have actually some guys that are not so young, but have been around and did a lot of stuff, but not mentors, people that actually go in and do the stuff, right, together with them.
That's the right thing. And so many people must come and ask, can I have an interview with him? Can I have a meeting with you? I have tons of questions to ask you regarding my startup. You must be repeating all the time, all the same things.
Well, I'm not a great mentor, and I don't have time for it anyway. So I'm not really doing that kind of stuff, but I can point them in the right direction. And I mean, for me, that's really what I do. I say, "Oh, so you guys really think you're good at data? I have a guy here I'd like you to meet, professor from MIT that really knows about data. Have a little chat with him and see if you cannot learn or expand something there." And I have yet to see somebody not saying, "Whoa, I'm really happy you introduced me to that guy, because he really helped me along." And some people that are trying to do that, they maybe don't know exactly how to do reporting in a simple way. So we put a guy in that's Mr. Systematic, and he helps them set up a better reporting system. And so it's really like that, in terms of when people are already at the point where they have started their business. It's not so much I can do. Either I believe in it or I don't believe in it. If I make a speech at the Copenhagen Business School and it's wannabe entrepreneurs, then I can tell them boring stuff like, you should work a couple of years for somebody else so you actually know what you're doing. You should wait with diluting yourself, even though I'm the kind of guy that's going to dilute you. Be very careful with my type, because in the end you're going to end up not owning enough to motivate neither you nor me, and simple stuff like that. But that's kind of to students and that, and I do a fair amount of speaking in those contexts, right? But when they're actually there and they have done it and they have a product and they have a prototype, maybe have their first revenues and stuff, it's more about helping them, not start to dictate or be the wise guy that's so much cleverer than them. Then it's about helping. You have a weakness there. If you want, you can speak to this guy. That guy over there could be interesting for you to speak to, and that's more my role. I'm not trying to sit and tell people what they should do.
You had to make sacrifice during your life, personal life. Yes, no?
I don't think so.
Okay, you have kids?
I have a happy life. I have 5 daughters.
I have
a lovely wife. Maybe they had to make sacrifice, but by not seeing
Did you meet your wife when you were already the head of Saxo Bank?
No. We met way before that. So she can take a great deal of the credit for keeping me on track and doing something sensible. We met in London many years ago.
And it's really important to have someone.
Absolutely, very important. So I think, I had a wonderful life. I had to have done everything I wanted to do. I don't have as much time, but then again, that's kind of my own choice. I like to be busy, So.
What keeps you driven?
Well, to be honest, I really like this new phase of my life where I get involved with much smaller businesses and young people that still have fire in their eyes and really want to go for it and have great spirit. I love this kind of small business pioneering. We're gonna really make a difference, which we still have it in the bank, but it's in a more institutionalized way. I mean, we're still not like a 100,000 person institution or company, right? But there's something special about not necessarily young people, but typically young people that really have a great idea and they're working, 18 hours a day to execute this idea and they're excited and every little success is a great thing, and I like very much to be part of that and help a little bit if I can.
We always tell startups that they have to choose who is the captain, who is the leader, because at the end of the day, if there is a problem, you need to trust and follow one person. How do you do when you have co-CEO?
I always work for us, but I would also be very careful about suggesting that to anyone. But our relationship is very special. We built it from zero. We always saw we were quite different people. Everybody knows that. I'm a sort of more relaxed, and my partner's very aggressive, right? So, but I think we complemented each other extremely well. It hasn't always been dance on roses, because it shouldn't be. If we always agreed everything, there would be certainly no reason to be two people. But at the same time, Kim for me is the one guy I trust to make a decision if I was not there, and I think vice versa. So it has worked very well. Even though we made wrong decisions, we still have made them in almost equal terms, so we don't have a lot of finger pointing. And it does have the huge advantage that I've been traveling historically, probably most around the world. We have 27 offices around the world today. Kim has been more sort of the steady hand on the ship here in the HQ, and it's a strong thing to know that you can be in Johannesburg and there's still a CEO at home, right? And vice versa, right? So it has worked extremely well. I'm extremely fond of Kim, and we had such a long. We've been together 23 years in the business and 20 years as co-CEOs, and it's like an old couple. You can sit and bitch about things.
So a lot of trust, a lot of respect, and at the end of the day, if there is a fight.
But that is
never happened.
Yeah, of course we can argue about something, but at the end of the day, we make a decision and then we walk out of the room and then we stick to that decision. I think that's pretty important, right? And if it was so that Kim was always right, I was always right, it would be a problem. But I think we're both wrong frequently and right frequently. And the long and short is it's also worked. If it had been a constant failure, we probably wouldn't have lasted 20 years. But because we have, after all, had more successes than failures,
And the third co-founder that was mentioned at the beginning, why did he left?
Well, he was never really involved in the business, so he had some other stuff that he wanted to do. He's actually built a tremendously successful telephone company, so he's doing extremely well. He's still very, very close friends, so everything is very happy there as well. And thank God he made a very successful business as well, so he has never had reason to regret moving out. But of course, it's a change now, because I must say the last couple of years I've become more and more tired of what it was to be a bank CEO with all this enormous focus on regulation and laws and directives and this and that, and you have hardly any time left to speak to the customers. So the last couple of years have been growing a little bit in me, I would like to do one other thing in my life, right? One other sort of big long-term thing. So I said to Kim, do you mind if you ran it yourself for a few years here and I just help in the background? And he said, if that's what you want to do, then let's do it. But I'm still, once we finish here, I'm going to the bank because we have a client event tonight. So I'm still doing some of the business development and working with the clients, which is what I love the most. And I'm just quite happy I don't have to do so much of the formal stuff, right? And I think Kim is also enjoying his time. So I think it's very, very happy. Not many people can stick together for that long time, and I think it is a dangerous route, but when it works, it does give you 48 hours in the day rather than 24, right? So.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.